Father, why would you do this to me? What have I done to deserve all this?
Angela stormed out of the boardroom, mascara streaking down her cheeks, the imprint of her father's hand still burning red across her face. The chatter in the hallway died instantly. Every assistant, every junior associate froze mid-step, staring at the woman who had just been slapped by the founder of Whitmore Holdings in front of the entire executive floor. "Get out of my office," Richard Whitmore had roared, tossing a manila envelope across the desk like it was garbage. "You want to be a shareholder? You want equity? After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me? Get out." Angela had stood there, hand pressed to her cheek, staring at her own father as if she were seeing him for the first time. 10 years. 10 years of unpaid overtime, of missed birthdays, of building his empire brick by brick while he handed promotions to men who couldn't tell a balance sheet from a grocery list. 10 years, and this was her answer. A slap, a termination letter. She hadn't even made it to the elevator before the office doors behind her exploded open. "Where is he?" The voice cracked through the hallway like thunder, low and lethal, carrying the kind of authority that made grown men in three-piece suits step back against the walls without being told to. Every head turned. Angela turned too, and her stomach dropped. Ji-hoon. Her husband stood in the doorway of the boardroom, his tailored charcoal coat still buttoned, his jaw locked so tight a vein pulsed at his temple. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd only stopped by to walk her to lunch, a small, ordinary gesture he insisted on every Friday, no matter how many billion-dollar mergers were sitting on his desk in Seoul. He was supposed to have waited in the lobby. He hadn't. He'd heard everything. "Ji-hoon," Angela whispered, reaching for his arm. "Don't. Please, just take me home." He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Richard Whitmore, who had just emerged from the boardroom, straightening his jacket like a man who'd merely swatted a fly. "You?" Richard sneered, jabbing a finger toward his son-in-law. "This doesn't concern you. This is a family matter." "A family matter?" Ji-hoon repeated, and something in his voice made the temperature in the hallway drop 10 degrees. "You put your hands on my wife." "She's my daughter. I built this company. I can discipline my own." "She built this company." Ji-hoon's voice rose, sharp enough to slice glass. "Every contract on that floor, every account you're too lazy to manage yourself, every deal that kept this place from bankruptcy in 2019, that was her. And you paid her nothing. You gave her nothing. And when she finally asked for what she earned, you slapped her in front of 40 employees." A murmur rippled through the crowd, gathering at a careful distance. Somebody's phone was already recording. Richard's face went a mottled shade of red. "Get off my property," Richard snapped. "Both of you. And you," he pointed at Angela. "Don't bother coming back. You're finished here." Ji-hoon laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. "You misunderstand something, Richard." He pulled his phone from his coat pocket, unhurried, deliberate, the way a man moves when he already knows the outcome of a fight before it starts. "Whitmore Holdings has been drowning in debt for 18 months. The only reason your creditors haven't foreclosed on this building is because Daehan Capital quietly bought out 60% of your outstanding loans 3 months ago." The color drained from Richard's face. "That's not possible." "It's very possible," Ji-hoon said, "when your daughter is married to the man who runs Daehan Capital." Angela's breath caught. She hadn't known. In 4 years of marriage, Ji-hoon had never once mentioned it, never used it, never let his business touch hers, because he knew, he'd always known, how much she wanted to earn her place here, on her own terms. He'd protected that, quietly, from the shadows, even while her own father humiliated her to her face. "You wouldn't dare," Richard said, but his voice had lost its thunder. "I would," Ji-hoon said. Security. 2 men in black suits stepped out from behind him, men Angela hadn't even noticed following him up from the lobby. Ji-hoon never went anywhere without them, though she'd always assumed it was excessive caution, a billionaire's habit. Now she understood it was preparation. He'd known, somehow, deep down, that a day like this was coming. "Escort Mr. Whitmore off the premises," Ji-hoon said, calm now, terrifyingly calm. "He no longer has authority to be in this building. You can't do this. I own this company." "You own this company," Ji-hoon corrected. "As of this morning, Daehan Capital called in the loans. The board received the paperwork an hour ago. You've been outvoted, Richard. Effective immediately, you're no longer CEO of Whitmore Holdings. The hallway went utterly silent. Somewhere, a phone camera zoomed in. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on dry land. Angela, he said suddenly, spinning toward his daughter, his voice cracking with something that might have been panic, might have been desperation. Angela, tell him to stop this. I'm your father. Angela stared at him, at the man who had raised her on promises he never kept, who had let her believe that hard work alone would earn her a seat at his table, who had just struck her hard enough to leave a mark rather than admit she deserved one. You stopped being my father, she said quietly, the moment you chose Marcus's business connections over my happiness. The moment you told me marrying Ji-hoon would ruin the merger you wanted. The moment you looked at your own daughter's face after a decade of free labor and decided a slap was easier than an apology. Angela, take him out, Ji-hoon said again, and this time the security guards moved. Richard thrashed against their grip, shouting threats that dissolved into incoherence as they walked him past the gawking staff, past the elevator bank, past the gleaming Whitmore Holdings sign he'd spent 30 years building his ego around. Angela watched until the elevator doors closed on his red, furious face. Then her knees buckled. Ji-hoon caught her before she hit the floor, pulling her into his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other pressed flat against her spine, like he could physically shield her from everything that had just happened. She felt him shaking too, felt the fury still coursing through him even as his voice dropped to something achingly soft against her hair. I should have come up sooner, he murmured. I heard you crying through the door and His jaw tightened. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Angela. She clutched the front of his coat, finally letting herself sob. 10 years of swallowed exhaustion breaking loose all at once in the middle of a hallway full of strangers. She didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. That her father, humiliated and stripped of his company in front of his own staff, was already on the phone in the elevator, dialing a number he'd sworn he'd never use again. That somewhere across the city, a man named Marcus Delacroix, the friend her father had once tried to force her to marry, was about to become the most dangerous person in her life. Beautiful people, before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here, and when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full, unrated audiobook of the twin brothers' temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely. If you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. Now, let's get right back into today's story. Angela sat curled against Ji-hoon's chest in the back of the car, her cheeks still throbbing, watching the city blur past the tinted windows. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes. Ji-hoon's arms stayed locked around her shoulders, his thumb tracing slow, absent circles against her arm, the only sign that his fury hadn't fully cooled. I need to know something, Angela finally said, her voice hoarse. How long have you owned my father's debt? Ji-hoon exhaled. 14 months. 14 months. She pulled back to look at him. You've known for over a year that my father was drowning, and you never said a word. Because I knew what you'd say if I told you. His eyes met hers, steady, unflinching. You'd tell me to stay out of it. You'd say you wanted to earn your place without me interfering. So I didn't interfere. I just made sure that when the moment came, and I always knew it would come, he couldn't crush you the way he's been trying to for 10 years. Angela's throat tightened. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to accuse him of overstepping. of treating her like something fragile that needed protecting. But she couldn't, because underneath the shock was something warmer, something that ached in a different way entirely. He'd been guarding her from a distance for over a year, silently, expecting nothing in return. "You're insane," she whispered. "I'm thorough," he corrected, and the corner of his mouth lifted, just barely, the first hint of softness since he'd stormed into that boardroom. "Which is why I also know your father just called someone from the elevator." Angela stiffened. "Who?" "I don't know yet." Ji-hoon's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it, and whatever he saw made the muscle in his jaw tighten all over again. "But I'm about to find out." The car pulled up outside Angela's childhood home 20 minutes later, a sprawling colonial in the most exclusive gated community in Charleston, the kind of house Richard Whitmore had built specifically to remind everyone who walked through the door exactly how far he'd come. Angela hadn't set foot inside it in months. She wasn't sure why Ji-hoon was taking her there now, not after everything. "Why are we here?" she asked. "Because your father isn't going to stop," Ji-hoon said simply. "Men like him don't slink away quietly. He's going to try to salvage what's left of his pride, and the fastest way to do that is to go after the one thing he still thinks he controls." "Which is?" Before he could answer, the front door of the house swung open, and a man Angela hadn't seen in 4 years stepped out onto the porch, smiling like he already owned the ground beneath his feet. Marcus Delacroix. "Angela," he said warmly, descending the steps with the easy confidence of old money and older grudges. "It's been a long time." Angela's stomach turned to ice. "What are you doing here?" "Your father called me." Marcus's eyes flicked briefly, dismissively, to Ji-hoon, before returning to her, lingering a beat too long on the bruised curve of her cheek. "He's had a rough afternoon, from what I understand. Thought I should come check on the family." "The family?" Angela repeated. "You're not family, Marcus." "You never were." "I could have been." His voice dropped, syrupy and slow. "If you hadn't run off with—" He gestured vaguely at Ji-hoon. "Him. Your father and I had an agreement, Angela. Merger, marriage, the whole package. It would have made Whitmore Holdings the biggest logistics firm on the eastern seaboard. Instead, you threw it away, for a foreign billionaire's pretty face." Ji-hoon stepped forward, close enough that Marcus's confident smile faltered for the first time. "Say that again," Ji-hoon said quietly. "I want to be sure I understood you correctly." Marcus straightened, clearly unused to being challenged. "I'm simply stating facts. Richard lost everything today because his daughter chose love over business, and now, apparently, his own son-in-law has stolen the company out from under him. Tell me, Angela, was any of it worth it?" Angela felt the old, familiar shame rising in her chest, the shame her father had spent a decade cultivating, the shame that told her she was selfish for wanting a life of her own choosing. But this time, something else rose faster. Anger, cold and clean and long overdue. "Every second," she said. "Every single second was worth it. I built that company with my bare hands while my father handed out titles to men who golfed with him on weekends. I earned every dollar Whitmore Holdings ever made, and he repaid me with a slap and a termination letter. So don't stand on my father's porch and lecture me about what I threw away, Marcus." "I didn't throw anything away. I finally stopped giving pieces of myself to people who never deserved them." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Careful, Angela. You might want to reconsider that tone. Your father's business isn't the only thing that could come crashing down." "Is that a threat?" Ji-hoon's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "It's a warning." Marcus smiled again, though it no longer reached his eyes. "You think buying up a struggling company's debt makes you untouchable? I have friends on the city council, friends in state regulatory offices. Foreign investment firms operating in this state get scrutinized very, very closely if the wrong people start asking questions. Zoning violations, labor complaints, tax irregularities. It's amazing what surfaces once someone starts looking." Angela's blood ran cold. She knew Marcus well enough to know it wasn't an empty threat. His family had spent 3 generations building political leverage in Charleston, the kind of quiet, rotten influence that didn't need courtrooms to destroy people. But Ji-hoon didn't flinch. "Do it," he said. "Send your friends. Have them dig through every filing, every contract, every account Daehan Capital has ever touched in this country. I welcome it. Because when they find nothing, and they will find nothing, because I don't build empires on sand the way your family does, I'll make sure every one of those officials remembers exactly who wasted their time. And then I'll ask them to look a little closer at Delacroix Shipping's customs filings from the last 5 years. Marcus's smug expression cracked for just a moment, a flicker of something uncertain passing behind his eyes. That's what I thought, Ji-hoon said. He turned to Angela, his voice softening instantly, the transformation so complete it was almost disorienting. Come on, we're not staying here. Angela let him guide her back toward the car, her legs trembling with adrenaline she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Behind them, Marcus called out one last time, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn. This isn't over, Angela. Your father isn't going to just disappear quietly, and neither am I. She didn't turn around. She'd spent 10 years turning around every time someone in her life demanded her attention, her loyalty, her silence. She was done. But as the car pulled away from the house that had never truly felt like home, Angela's phone buzzed in her lap. A text from an unknown number. You should have married who your father chose. Now you'll lose everything. The company, the money, and eventually him too. Angela's hands went cold around the phone. She looked up at Ji-hoon, who was watching her face carefully, already sensing something was wrong. What is it? He asked. She turned the screen toward him without a word and watched his expression shift from concern to something darker, something colder than she'd ever seen on his face before. Someone's been watching us, he said quietly. And I think I know exactly who sent it. Beautiful people, before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here, and when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full, unrated audiobook of the twin brothers' temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely. If you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. Now, let's get right back into today's story. Angela stared at the phone in Ji-hoon's hand, her pulse hammering against her throat. Who? She demanded. Who sent it? Ji-hoon's thumb moved across the screen, tracing the number, his expression unreadable. It's not Marcus's number. But it doesn't need to be. He has people for this. People for what? Threatening texts? Intimidation, Ji-hoon said flatly. It's how men like him operate when they can't win with money or influence. They chip away at you until you break. He looked up at her, and for the first time since the boardroom, Angela saw a flicker of real worry cross his face, quickly buried beneath his usual composure. I should have brought more security today. I don't need a small army following me around, Ji-hoon. You do, he said simply. If the 2 most dangerous men in Charleston have both decided you're their enemy in the same afternoon. The car dropped them at their penthouse an hour later, 32 floors above the city, glass walls staring out over a skyline that had once made Angela feel invincible. Tonight it just felt exposed. She kicked off her heels the moment the door shut behind them, sinking onto the edge of the couch, replaying the day over and over, her father's hand cracking across her face, Marcus's oily smile, the cold finality of that text message. Ji-hoon disappeared into his study for 20 minutes, murmuring rapid, low Korean into his phone, the kind of clipped, efficient tone Angela had learned meant business was being handled. Quietly, thoroughly, permanently. When he finally emerged, his tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, and something in his shoulders had eased, just slightly. I've doubled security on the building, he said, sitting beside her. And I had someone trace the number. It's a burner. Untraceable. Purchased in cash. Which means whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. So it could be either of them. It could be both of them, Ji-hoon said grimly. Your father and Marcus have hated each other for years. But hatred has a funny way of turning into partnership when two men share the same enemy. Angela pressed her palms against her eyes. This was supposed to be the day I finally stood up for myself. Instead, I feel like I lit a fuse I can't put out. You didn't light anything, Ji-hoon said, pulling her hands gently away from her face, holding them between both of his. Your father lit it 10 years ago, the first time he let you believe unpaid labor was love. I just made sure the explosion happened on your terms instead of his. Angela looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd walked away from a multi-billion-dollar empire in Seoul just to sit beside her on a Tuesday night holding her hands like they were something precious. She'd married him against every warning her father had thrown at her. He's foreign, he's ambitious, he'll never understand our world, he'll leave the moment something better comes along. 4 years later, and he was the only person in her life who had never once left. Thank you, she whispered, for today, for all of it. Don't thank me yet, Ji-hoon said quietly. This is only the beginning of the fight. Your father lost his company today, but pride like his doesn't die that easily. He'll come back swinging, and he'll bring Marcus with him. He was right. 3 days later, Angela's phone rang while she was reviewing shareholder documents at the small consulting office she'd opened after the divorce from her father's payroll. The one thing she'd built entirely on her own. No Whitmore name attached, no favors owed. It was her mother. Angela. Her mother's voice was thin, trembling. You need to come home. Your father's had a heart attack. Angela's stomach dropped straight through the floor. She didn't remember the drive to the hospital, only the sterile white corridor, the antiseptic smell, the sight of her mother sitting hollow-eyed outside the ICU, mascara long since cried away. Angela rushed to her side. Mom, what happened? He collapsed at the office, her mother said. The doctors say it's stress. His blood pressure spiked so high they almost lost him. She grabbed Angela's hands, desperate. He's been asking for you, baby. Please. Whatever happened between you two, please. Just go see him. Angela stood frozen outside the door for a long moment before she pushed it open. Richard Whitmore lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. Tubes running from his arm, monitors beeping steadily beside him. His eyes opened when she entered, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Genuine fear. Angela, he rasped. You came. Mom asked me to. Not for me? A ghost of his old bitterness flickered across his face. Even now. Even here. Angela crossed her arms. I'm not here to fight with you, Dad, but I'm not here to pretend the last 10 years didn't happen either. Richard's throat worked. For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing, staring at the ceiling as if searching for the right words somewhere in the fluorescent light. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked in a way Angela had never heard before. I was wrong, he said, about the company, about Marcus, about... His eyes flicked to her cheek, the faint yellow shadow of a bruise still visible beneath her makeup. About that day. Angela's chest tightened. 10 years she'd waited to hear those words. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times. Imagined it would feel like relief, like vindication, like finally exhaling a breath she'd been holding since she was 22 years old. Instead, it just felt hollow. You almost died, she said quietly. And the first thing you think to apologize for is the company? That's not. Richard swallowed hard. I'm trying, Angela. Try harder, she said, and turned toward the door. But before she could leave, her father's next words stopped her cold. Marcus came to see me yesterday, Richard said. Before the heart attack, he had a proposal. Angela turned slowly. What kind of proposal? Richard's eyes wouldn't meet hers. He said if I helped him ruin your husband's business here in the States, helped him dig up something, anything, real or fabricated, he'd help me buy back my company from Daehan Capital. Said he had a judge in his pocket who could freeze the loan transfer on a technicality. Angela's blood turned to ice. And what did you tell him? Her father finally looked at her, and in his eyes, She saw something that terrified her more than any slap ever could. Genuine desperation. The look of a man who had lost everything and was calculating exactly how much more he was willing to lose to get it back. "I told him," Richard whispered, "that I'd think about it. Beautiful people. Before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here, and when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full, unrated audiobook of the twin brothers' temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely. If you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. Now, let's get right back into today's story. Angela stared at her father, the hospital monitor's steady beeping the only sound in the room for what felt like an eternity. "You told him you'd think about it." Her voice shook, disbelief curdling into fury. "Dad, you almost died 3 days ago, and your first instinct wasn't to protect your family. It was to weigh how much more damage you could do to get your company back. Angela, you don't understand what it's like to lose everything you built." "I understand exactly what that feels like," she cut in, sharp as glass. "I built that company for 10 years and lost every ounce of credit for it the moment you decided a slap was cheaper than a paycheck. Don't you dare talk to me about loss." Richard's chest rose and fell unevenly, the monitor ticking faster. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm telling you because I don't trust Marcus. He's not doing this out of loyalty to me. He wants something else, something bigger." "What? You?" Richard said quietly. "He's obsessed with the idea that you chose Ji-hoon over him. This isn't about business anymore, Angela. It stopped being about business the moment you married someone else. Marcus doesn't want the merger. He wants to watch your marriage burn, and he'll use my company, my desperation, anything he can get his hands on to make it happen." Angela's stomach twisted. She thought of the text message. "You should have married who your father chose. Now you'll lose everything. The company, the money, and eventually, him too." She turned and walked out without another word, her heels striking the hospital linoleum in sharp, furious clicks, her mother calling after her uselessly. She didn't stop until she was in the parking garage, phone pressed to her ear, Ji-hoon's voice answering on the second ring. "Angela, what's wrong?" "Marcus went to my father," she said, breathless. "He offered to help him get the company back if my father helps him destroy you. And Ji-hoon," her voice cracked. "This was never about business for him. It's about me. He wants to burn our marriage down." There was a beat of silence on the line, and when Ji-hoon spoke again, his voice had dropped into that low, dangerous register she'd only heard once before, in the hallway outside her father's boardroom. "Come home," he said. "Now. I'm calling the office." Angela didn't ask questions. She drove straight to the penthouse, her hands trembling on the wheel the entire way, glancing in the rearview mirror at every car that lingered a beat too long behind her. By the time she burst through the door, Ji-hoon was already standing in the living room, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, 3 phones laid out across the coffee table, like a general preparing for war. "Sit," he said gently, guiding her to the couch. "Tell me everything your father said, word for word." She did. Every detail, every threat, every flicker of fear she'd seen behind her father's eyes. Ji-hoon listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each new revelation, until finally he sat back, exhaling slowly. "Marcus has been planning this longer than we thought," he said. "This isn't impulsive. He's been building toward it for months, maybe longer." "How do you know?" Because 2 weeks ago, someone tried to access Daehan Capital's internal servers using stolen credentials from a former employee, Ji-hoon said. I assumed it was corporate espionage, competitors trying to get ahead of an acquisition. I didn't think to connect it to your father, because at the time, your father still had control of his company. But if Marcus was already working an angle with him even then he's been planning to come after you since before the boardroom, Angela finished, horror dawning slow and cold. Before I even asked my father for shares. Before any of this happened. Which means, Ji-hoon said grimly, the slap, the termination letter, all of it might not have been your father acting alone out of ego. It might have been engineered. Angela's world tilted sideways. You think Marcus told my father to fire me? To humiliate me like that? I think, Ji-hoon said carefully, that Marcus needed a reason for me to storm into that building. He needed a public spectacle, witnesses, cameras. He needed the world to see Daehan Capital seize Whitmore Holdings so dramatically that it would draw exactly the kind of regulatory attention he threatened us with outside your father's house. He's not improvising, Angela. He's been playing a long game, and we just walked directly into the opening move. The weight of it settled over Angela like ice water. 10 years of resentment, of unpaid labor, of believing her father's cruelty was simply who he was, and now the possibility that even that cruelty might have been a chess piece in someone else's game. It was almost too much to hold. So what do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ji-hoon reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers, grounding her the way he always did, when the world felt like it was spinning too fast. We stop reacting, he said, and we start hunting. He pulled his laptop toward him, fingers moving swiftly across the keys, pulling up files Angela didn't fully understand. Shipping manifests, customs records, offshore account trails that Daehan Capital's intelligence division had apparently been compiling on Delacroix Shipping for months. Long before any of this began, simply as standard due diligence on a competitor. Delacroix Shipping has been underreporting cargo weights on at least 4 international routes for the past 3 years, Ji-hoon murmured, scanning the documents. That's not just a tax irregularity, Angela. That's federal customs fraud. If even half of this is accurate, Marcus isn't just risking his company. He's risking prison. Can you prove it? Not yet. Ji-hoon closed the laptop slowly, his eyes meeting hers, calm now, terrifyingly calm, the eye of a storm that hadn't finished building. But I know someone who can get us the rest, and I think it's time your father decided which side of this war he actually wants to be on. Angela swallowed hard. You want to talk to him? No, Ji-hoon said. I want you to talk to him. One more time? Because if there's any part of your father that regrets what he's done, any part that still loves you more than he loves his pride, this is his last chance to prove it. Angela's phone buzzed on the table between them. Another unknown number. Another message. This one longer, colder, more deliberate than the last. Tell your husband to check his mother's medical records from 20 years ago. Some secrets don't stay buried forever, and neither will your marriage. Angela looked up slowly and watched every trace of color drain from Ji-hoon's face. Beautiful people. Before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here, and when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full, unrated audiobook of the twin brothers' temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely. If you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. Now, let's get right back into today's story. Jihoon didn't move. For a long, suspended moment, he simply stared at the phone in Angela's hand, his face gone unnervingly still. Not the calm of control, but the stillness of a man who'd just been struck somewhere he thought no one could reach. Jihoon, Angela set the phone down slowly. What does that mean? Your mother's medical records? He didn't answer right away. He rose from the couch and walked to the window, staring out at the glittering skyline, as if the answer might be written somewhere in the lights of the city. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all its earlier steel. My mother died when I was 19, he said. Officially, it was a heart condition. That's what the death certificate says. That's what I've told everyone my entire life. Officially? He turned to face her, and Angela had never seen him look so young, so unguarded. There were rumors, when I was a teenager, that my mother's death wasn't natural, that someone in my father's business circle had a reason to want her gone, a rival conglomerate, a business dispute my father never fully explained. I was 19. I didn't understand half of what was happening around me. My father shut the rumors down within weeks. Paid people to stop talking. I told myself it was grief, making people cruel, making them invent conspiracies out of tragedy. And now? Now someone is threatening to reopen a 20-year-old wound I buried so deep, I convinced myself it never existed. His jaw tightened, which means Marcus didn't just dig into Daehan Capital's finances. He dug into my family, my past, things that happened in Seoul before I ever set foot in Charleston. Angela crossed the room and took both his hands in hers. Then we dig deeper than he did. Whatever's buried, we find it before he uses it as a weapon. Angela, if there's any truth to those rumors, then we deserve to know it, she said fiercely. You've spent your whole life not knowing. I've spent 10 years not being believed. We are done letting other people control what we're allowed to find out about our own lives. Something in his expression cracked open. Gratitude and fear and love tangled together so completely that for a moment neither of them said anything at all. Then his phone rang, shattering the silence, and the number on the screen made his whole body go rigid. It's my father, he said. Calling from Seoul. He answered on speaker, his voice clipped, controlled. Abeoji. Jihoon. His father's voice was tight, urgent, carrying an edge of panic. Angela had never heard associated with the notoriously composed Daehan Capital founder. Someone contacted me an hour ago, a journalist, claiming to have documents about your mother's death. He said an American businessman gave him access to files that were supposed to have been destroyed. Jihoon's grip on Angela's hand tightened until it nearly hurt. What documents? Hospital records, his father said, voice dropping. Toxicology reports. Things I made sure disappeared 20 years ago. Angela's breath caught. Beside her, Jihoon had gone deathly pale. You told me it was a heart condition, he said slowly. Silence stretched across the line, long enough that Angela wondered if the call had dropped. Then his father spoke again, quieter now, older sounding than Angela had ever heard him. Your mother's heart condition was real, he said. But it wasn't why she died, Jihoon. She was poisoned, slowly, over months, by someone inside our own household. I found out too late to save her, and by the time I understood who was responsible, exposing it would have destroyed everything. The company, your future, everything I'd built for you to inherit. I chose to bury it instead of burn it all down for justice I couldn't guarantee. Jihoon's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Who did it? I don't know if you're ready to hear this. Who did it? Another long pause. Angela could hear his father's breathing, ragged, unsteady, an old man carrying a secret that had clearly been eating him alive for 2 decades. Her sister, he finally said. Your aunt. She believed she should have inherited controlling shares in the company instead of your mother. She poisoned her slowly enough that the doctors mistook it for a cardiac condition, and she used the resulting inheritance dispute to seize a 20% stake in Daehan Capital that she still holds to this day. Angela watched Jihoon's entire world visibly rearrange itself in real time, the floor of his understanding giving way beneath 20 years of assumed grief. She's on the board, Jihoon said numbly. I sit across from her at quarterly meetings. I call her Emo. I let my children call her. He stopped himself, jaw working. She's been sitting across the table from me my entire adult life. and you let me believe she was family. I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. Ji-hoon snapped, fury breaking through the shock. And now Marcus Delacroix has documents that could expose all of it, and he's using it as leverage against my marriage instead of justice for my mother. Angela stepped closer, pressing her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her hand. Ji-hoon? Look at me. He did, his eyes glassy with a rage 20 years in the making. This is exactly what Marcus wants, she said steadily. He wants you unraveled. He wants you making rash decisions out of grief and fury so he can swoop in and finish whatever plan he's been building. We don't give him that. We use what we know instead. Something in her calm seemed to anchor him, pulling him back from the edge of whatever precipice his family's 20-year lie had pushed him toward. He nodded slowly, once, and turned back to the phone. Abeoji, I need every file you have on my mother's death. Every document, every name, every payment you made to bury this. Send it to me tonight. Ji-hoon, if this becomes public. It's already becoming public, Ji-hoon said coldly. The only question now is whether we control the story or whether Marcus Delacroix gets to write it for us. He ended the call and stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. Angela's hand still pressed against his chest, like the only solid thing left in a world that had just tilted violently off its axis. Then his other phone buzzed, the burner tracker he'd set up days earlier, and his eyes snapped down to the screen. A location had finally pinged. The number that had been sending Angela threatening texts had just made a call, and the call had originated from a hotel less than 2 miles from where they stood. Marcus is in Charleston, Ji-hoon said, his voice gone flat and lethal. Right now. Beautiful people, before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here, and when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full, unrated audiobook of The Twin Brothers' Temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely, if you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. Now, let's get right back into today's story. Angela felt the room tilt. Here? In Charleston? Right now? 2 miles away, Ji-hoon said, already moving, pulling his jacket back on, sliding one of the phones into his pocket. The Cambridge Grand on King Street. He's not hiding it. He wants to be found. Then it's a trap. Obviously. Ji-hoon paused at the door, looking back at her, and for the first time all night, some of the fire in his eyes banked down into something steadier, more deliberate. Which is exactly why I'm not walking into it blind, and neither are you. He made 3 calls in the elevator down, his head of security, his legal counsel, and a private investigator Angela had never heard him mention before. A woman named Priya, who apparently had spent a decade doing exactly this kind of work for Daehan Capital's most sensitive cases. By the time the car pulled away from the building, there was a plan, terse and precise. Laid out in a language of logistics Angela was only half following. I'm coming with you, she said. Angela, he's using my father against you. He's using your mother against me. This is not a fight you get to have without me in the room. Her voice didn't waver. I've spent 10 years being told to sit quietly while men decided things about my life. Not tonight. Ji-hoon studied her for a long moment, and something that looked almost like pride flickered across his face despite everything. Fine, but you stay behind me, and you let me talk first. The Cambridge Grand's top floor was quiet, opulent. The kind of understated luxury that whispered old money instead of shouting it. Marcus was waiting for them in a private lounge, a glass of scotch already sweating on the table beside him, looking entirely too relaxed for a man who'd just orchestrated the unraveling of two families in under a week. Ji-hoon, Angela. He gestured lazily to the seats across from him. I wondered how long it would take you to find me. Cut the theater, Marcus. Ji-hoon didn't sit. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Marcus's eyes flicked to Angela, lingering, possessive in a way that made her skin crawl. Everything your family took from mine the moment Angela chose you over the future her father and I built for her. You never had a future with me, Angela said sharply. There was never an us to take, Marcus. You built a fantasy in your head and blamed everyone else when it didn't come true. Did I? Marcus leaned forward. Or did your father simply cave the moment a richer offer walked through the door? Funny how loyalty evaporates when there's a bigger fortune on the table. You're one to talk about loyalty, Ji-hoon said coldly, considering you've spent months digging through my mother's death like it's leverage instead of a tragedy. Something flickered across Marcus's face, the first crack in his composure. I do what's necessary to win. Win what? Angela demanded. A marriage that was never yours to claim? A company you couldn't build on your own merit? What exactly is the prize here, Marcus? Because from where I'm standing, all I see is a man so obsessed with what he couldn't have that he's willing to burn down two families to prove a point nobody but him cares about. Marcus's jaw tightened, the mask slipping further. You have no idea what your father promised me, Angela. 15 years ago, before you were even old enough to understand mergers and marriage contracts, Richard Whitmore promised me your hand as part of a business deal that would have made both our families untouchable. I built my entire adult life around that promise, and then you humiliated me in front of every important family on the Eastern Seaboard by running off with him instead. I never agreed to that deal, Angela said, disgusted. I was 17 when you and my father cooked up that arrangement. I never said yes to being handed off like an asset. And yet here we are, Marcus said, with your father's company gutted, your husband's family secrets unearthed, and you still standing there, acting like none of it is your fault. Ji-hoon moved so fast Angela barely saw it, closing the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping the front of Marcus's jacket, hauling him half out of his seat. You will not speak to her like that again. Or what? Marcus's smile was thin, dangerous, utterly unafraid. You'll do what, exactly? Assault me in a public hotel with witnesses everywhere? Go ahead. Give me something else to leverage. Ji-hoon released him slowly, deliberately, stepping back with visible effort. You want war, Marcus. Fine, but you should know exactly what you're starting before you finish it. He pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward him. Delacroix Shipping, 4 international routes, 3 years of falsified cargo manifests, systematic underreporting to avoid federal tariffs. I have the documents. I have the shipping logs. I have sworn statements from 2 of your former customs brokers, who are very interested in immunity deals. Marcus's composure finally, visibly cracked. You're bluffing. Try me, Ji-hoon said. Or better yet, call your lawyer and ask him how the FBI feels about federal customs fraud when it's paired with witness intimidation. Because that text message you sent my wife 3 days ago, that's a federal offense too, and I have the number traced directly back to a burner you purchased in cash at a gas station 4 blocks from your office. Your face is on the security footage, Marcus. Cash doesn't buy anonymity anymore. It buys evidence. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Marcus's hand trembled slightly around his glass, the first honest emotion he'd shown all night. What do you want? He finally said, low and tight. I want you to stay away from my wife, Ji-hoon said. I want you to stay away from her father, whatever twisted arrangement you 2 cooked up in that hospital room. And I want every file you have on my mother's death sent to my legal team by morning. Or I promise you, the customs fraud will be the least of your problems. Marcus's eyes darted to Angela, one last flicker of something. Regret, maybe, or simple defeat, before he looked away entirely. Fine, he said. You win. This round. There is no next round, Ji-hoon said. This ends tonight. They left him sitting alone in the lounge, scotch untouched, his empire of quiet influence crumbling in real time behind them. But as the elevator doors closed, Angela's phone buzzed one final time that night. Not from an unknown number this time, but from her mother. "Angela, come quickly. Your father discharged himself from the hospital against doctor's orders. He's gone. And he took something from my jewelry box before he left. The deed to the old family property. I think he's going to do something reckless." Beautiful people, before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here. And when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full unrated audiobook of the twin brothers' temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely. If you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. Now, let's get right back into today's story. Angela's stomach dropped as she read the message twice, the words blurring together. "My mother's jewelry box," she said, turning the phone toward Ji-hoon. He took the deed to the old family property before he left the hospital, against doctor's orders. "What old family property?" "A warehouse district on the waterfront," Angela said, already dialing her mother back. "It was the very first piece of land my grandfather bought when he started the business 60 years ago. My father's always called it the foundation stone. He'd never sell it. He'd never even mortgage it. It's the one thing he's kept completely separate from Whitmore Holdings his whole career. Until now," Ji-hoon said grimly, already redirecting the driver, "which means he's about to use it as collateral for something desperate." Her mother answered on the first ring, voice trembling. "Angela, thank God. He left almost an hour ago. The nurses tried to stop him, but he just walked out, IV line and all, tore it out of his own arm in the parking lot. I called his phone a dozen times. He's not answering. Do you have any idea where he'd go?" "I think," her mother's voice cracked, "I think he might be meeting Marcus." Angela's blood ran cold. "Mom, Marcus is done. We just left him 20 minutes ago. He backed down." "Not Marcus," her mother corrected, panic rising. "There's someone else. A man's been calling the house for 2 days. Someone your father owes money to from years ago, before you even started working for him. I heard your father on the phone last night, begging for time. He said if he could just put up the waterfront property as collateral, he could buy himself 30 more days." Ji-hoon's expression sharpened. "Ask her the man's name." Angela repeated the question. There was a long pause, the sound of her mother searching through old panic, old memory. "Dobrev," she finally said. "Victor Dobrev. Your father used to call him a business partner, years ago, before you were even in college. I always thought it sounded more like a threat than a partnership." The name meant nothing to Angela, but she watched Ji-hoon's face change entirely, every trace of his earlier fury replaced by something far more alarming. Genuine alarm. "Victor Dobrev," Ji-hoon repeated slowly, "is not a businessman. He's a loan shark who launders money through shell logistics companies up and down the eastern seaboard. Daehan Capital flagged his network 2 years ago during due diligence on an unrelated acquisition. If your father owes him money, and if your father is about to hand him the deed to prime waterfront real estate as collateral, then he's about to lose the last thing he owns to a man who will never let him buy it back," Angela finished, horror dawning. "Ji-hoon, if something happens to him tonight?" "Nothing is happening to him tonight," Ji-hoon said firmly, already redirecting the driver toward the waterfront district, his voice snapping into the same commanding register he'd used in the boardroom 5 days earlier. "Priya, I need Dobrev's known properties in Charleston, now." The car sped through darkened streets, past the gleaming downtown towers, and into the quieter, industrial edges of the city. warehouses looming like sleeping giants against the night sky. Angela's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Whatever anger she still carried toward her father, and there was plenty of it, a decade's worth, layered and complicated, none of it mattered next to the cold, animal fear of losing him entirely, to violence, to desperation, to a debt he'd apparently been hiding since before she was even born. They found his car first, parked crookedly outside a rusted warehouse gate, driver's door hanging open, hospital gown still visible on the passenger seat, where he must have changed in the parking lot. "Stay in the car," Ji-hoon said, already moving. "Absolutely not. Angela." "He's my father," she said, already out of the car behind him. "I am not staying behind glass while you walk into whatever this is." Ji-hoon's jaw worked, but there wasn't time to argue. He signaled to the two security men who'd been trailing them since the hotel, and together they moved through the gate into the warehouse's dim interior, the smell of rust and salt water thick in the air. They found Richard Whitmore standing in a pool of yellow light beneath a single hanging bulb, deed papers clutched in one shaking hand, facing a heavy-set man in an expensive coat who radiated the particular stillness of someone entirely comfortable with violence. "Dad!" Angela's voice echoed off the corrugated walls. Richard turned, and the sight of his own daughter standing in a condemned warehouse at 11 o'clock at night seemed to physically hurt him. "Angela, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she shot back, moving toward him despite Ji-hoon's hand catching her arm. "Dad, what are you doing?" "What is this?" "This," Viktor Dobrev said, his accented voice smooth and unhurried, "is your father settling a debt that's been accruing interest for 11 years, Ms. Whitmore. Or should I say, Mrs. His eyes slid to Ji-hoon with polite, chilling recognition. "I know exactly who you are. Daehan Capital." "Impressive reach, for a company that didn't exist when your father-in-law and I first did business." "This debt is not your daughter's concern," Richard said quickly, stepping slightly in front of Angela, as if the gesture might undo a decade of failing to protect her. "I have the collateral. Take the property. We're done." "Are we?" Dobrev's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Richard, you came to me 11 years ago because you needed capital to keep Whitmore Holdings alive during your first expansion, and you swore your daughter's inheritance in that company as collateral without ever telling her. Now your company belongs to your son-in-law, your collateral is worthless, and you're offering me a piece of waterfront property that's currently sitting under a pending environmental review that could tank its value by 60% within the year. You think I don't do my research?" Angela felt the floor drop out from under her a second time that night. "You used my inheritance as collateral 11 years ago? Before I even started working for you?" Richard didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. One more decade-old betrayal surfacing at the worst possible moment. One more piece of the truth about exactly how little her father had ever valued her, beyond what she could be leveraged for. "I think," Ji-hoon said quietly, stepping fully in front of both of them now, his voice carrying the same lethal calm he'd used on Marcus hours earlier. "It's time Mr. Dobrev and I had a private conversation about interest rates, statutory usury limits in this state, and exactly how many state banking regulators would be very interested in his lending practices." Dobrev's confident expression flickered, just slightly for the first time. "And," Ji-hoon added, "about why threatening a sick, elderly man in an abandoned warehouse in the middle of the night is not a negotiation. It's a felony. One my legal team would be delighted to pursue, publicly, with your name attached to every headline." For a long suspended moment, nobody moved. Then Dobrev laughed, low and humorless, and folded the deed papers back into Richard's trembling hand. "Keep your worthless property," he said. "But this isn't finished, Whitmore. Debts like yours don't simply disappear." He walked past them into the darkness beyond the warehouse doors, and the moment he was gone, Richard's legs finally gave out. Angela caught him before he hit the ground, his full weight sagging against her. This broken, desperate man who had spent her entire life building an empire on secrets he'd never had the courage to tell her. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her shoulder. And for the first time in 10 years, Angela believed him. "I'm so sorry, Angela. For everything." She held him there in the cold warehouse light, tears finally slipping down her own cheeks. while Ji-hoon watched quietly from a few feet away, and none of them noticed the second car idling just outside the gate, headlights dark, a figure inside watching everything unfold through a pair of night vision binoculars. Besties, if you're craving a story packed with dark possessiveness, hot steamy scenes, billionaire mafia power plays, and electric spicy chemistry, the twin brother temptation was made for you. Meet Nia Vance, a brilliant Columbia criminology operative sent undercover to dismantle Seoul's biggest syndicate from the inside. The plan was simple: get the financial codes and bring them down. But the mission detonates the moment she becomes entangled with identical twin brothers, Min Jun, the cold, ruthless corporate CEO, and Min Kyu, the volatile mafia enforcer who burns to own her. You will experience pure, heart-racing tension, where a lethal heroine uses her mind and body to bring powerful kings to their knees. It's a full-length, completely unrated 18-plus audio story, voiced and brought to life by Lady Poma, delivering raw, intense scenes that YouTube could never allow. Instant access. No waiting, no censorship. Download the full uncut audio instantly to your device for $4.99 only. Put on your headphones and experience the full story tonight. The link is the description of this story. Back to today's story. The figure in the dark car watched until Ji-hoon's convoy pulled away from the warehouse, then lowered the binoculars and dialed a number with steady, practiced fingers. They just left, the voice said quietly into the phone. Dobrev backed off. The old man's alive. What do you want me to do? On the other end, a woman's voice, cool, clipped, carrying the faint lilt of a Seoul accent worn smooth by decades abroad, answered without hesitation. Nothing yet, she said. Let them think they've won. Ji-hoon doesn't know I've already moved the shares. By the time he realizes his aunt isn't just sitting quietly on the board anymore, it will be far too late to stop the vote. The car pulled away into the night, unnoticed. 3 days passed in a blur of hospital visits, lawyers, and careful, cautious rebuilding. Richard Whitmore, discharged again, this time with an actual doctor's blessing, sat in his daughter's living room for the first time in over a year, looking older, smaller, stripped finally of the armor of arrogance he'd worn his entire adult life. I want to make this right, he said, turning a mug of untouched tea in his hands. Not the company, not the money. You, Angela. I want to make... You? Right. You can't undo 10 years with an apology, Angela said, but there was less ice in her voice than there had been a week ago. But you can start by telling me the truth. All of it. No more secrets surfacing in warehouses at midnight. So he did. He told her about the inheritance clause he'd signed away when she was 17, about the pressure Marcus's family had put on him for a decade, about Dobrev's original loan, and the slow, suffocating panic of a man who'd built his identity on an empire he could never quite admit was crumbling beneath him. It wasn't absolution, but it was, finally, honesty, the one thing Angela had wanted from him longer than she'd wanted shares or salary or recognition. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said quietly when he finished, but I don't want you dead in a warehouse either, so we start there. Slowly. Richard nodded, tears he didn't bother hiding slipping down his weathered face. Slowly, he agreed. I can live with slowly. It was the following week, at Daehan Capital's Charleston office, that everything Angela thought had been settled detonated all over again. Ji-hoon called an emergency board meeting after receiving a notice from Seoul, a formal filing, submitted by his aunt's legal team, invoking an obscure clause in his mother's original shareholder agreement. The clause, buried in decades-old paperwork nobody had reason to revisit, stated that if any evidence emerged proving foul play in the death of the company's founding shareholder, controlling interest would automatically transfer to the next of kin. By petition. Rather than by standard inheritance, a safeguard, ironically, that Ji-hoon's own grandfather had written to protect the family from exactly this kind of internal betrayal. She's using my mother's murder as a legal loophole, Ji-hoon said, staring at the documents with disbelief curling into fury. She poisoned her own sister, buried the truth for 20 years, and now that the truth is finally surfacing, she's twisting it to steal even more control. Can she actually win? Angela asked, reading over his shoulder. If the board believes her petition is filed in good faith, and if she frames herself as the wronged party seeking justice for her sister's death, instead of the person who caused it. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. It's possible. She's spent 20 years building a reputation as the grieving, devoted aunt. Nobody in Seoul knows what my father told me 3 nights ago. If I can't prove it in time for the emergency vote, she could walk away with majority control of Daehan capital. Then we prove it, Angela said simply. Together, the way we've handled everything else this week. What followed was 72 hours of relentless work. Ji-hoon's investigator Priya flying to Seoul personally, tracking down a retired hospital toxicologist who'd quietly kept private notes on Ji-hoon's mother's original blood work, notes that contradicted the official cause of death filed 20 years earlier. A former household staff member, long since retired and living modestly outside the city, finally willing to speak after 2 decades of silence, describing tea deliveries that only ever came from one particular hand. A paper trail of inheritance disputes and shell accounts that, once properly assembled, painted an undeniable picture of calculated, patient poison. The emergency board meeting convened 6 days later, held via secure video conference between Seoul and Charleston. Ji-hoon's aunt appeared composed, elegant, utterly convincing in her performance of grief-turned-vindication. Right up until Ji-hoon placed the toxicologist's notes, the staff member's sworn testimony, and 20 years of financial records on the table in front of the entire board. You didn't file this petition for justice, Ji-hoon said, his voice carrying across continents with lethal calm. You filed it because Marcus Delacroix approached you 3 weeks ago with evidence he'd dug up about my mother's death. And you realized the truth was finally going to surface, whether you controlled the narrative or not. So you decided to control it, one last time. His aunt's composed mask finally shattered on camera, in front of every board member, every shareholder, every executive who'd called her family for 20 years. She was always going to get everything, his aunt spat, years of buried resentment finally boiling over. Our father favored her from birth. I built half this company in the shadows while everyone praised her name on the letterhead. I deserved. You deserved nothing you took by poisoning your own sister, Ji-hoon said. The board will hear the full evidence. The authorities in Seoul are already involved, and your 20% stake is frozen effective immediately, pending criminal investigation. She was escorted off the call. The vote to formally strip her holdings passed unanimously within the hour. That night, Angela found Ji-hoon standing alone on their penthouse balcony, staring out at the same skyline that had witnessed the beginning of this entire nightmare 11 days earlier. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. It's over, she said softly. It's over, he agreed, turning to pull her into his arms properly, pressing a kiss into her hair. Your father's debt to Dobrev is settled. Daehan Capital bought it out and forgave it entirely, on the condition he never gambles with your inheritance again. Marcus's customs fraud case is already moving through federal court. My aunt will likely spend the rest of her life answering for what she did 20 years ago. And you, he tilted her chin up gently, you finally have what you always wanted, not because I gave it to you, because you refused to stop fighting for it. Angela smiled through tears she hadn't expected, thinking of the woman she'd been 11 days ago, slapped, humiliated, dismissed by the one man who was supposed to have believed in her most. She wasn't that woman anymore. She never would be again. Whitmore Han Holdings, she said quietly, testing the name of the newly restructured company on her tongue. Her father's legacy and her husband's empire, finally, properly, merged under both their names, with Angela herself sitting at the head of the board. Has a nice sound to it, Ji-hoon murmured against her hair, and for the first time in over a decade, Angela let herself believe that the fight, finally, truly, was behind her. Beautiful people, before we find out what happens next, besties, the uncensored audio is finally here, and when I say this is nothing like you have ever listened to before, I mean it. I took every single boundary and completely shattered it. The full, unrated audiobook of the twin brothers' temptation is officially live right now. 3 dangerously possessive Korean mafia brothers, 2 identical twins and their stepbrother, completely consumed by one gorgeous black woman who never saw them coming. It is dangerously dark, deeply obsessive, and so scorching hot that YouTube would ban my entire channel if I played even 10 seconds of it here. You can grab the full, instant download right now for only $4.99 using the link pinned in the comments and description box. It's a one-time purchase, yours to keep forever. But listen closely. If you grab your copy before midnight tonight, you unlock free VIP access into our private listener community and get exclusive spicy scenes from the next series for free before the rest of the world even knows they exist. Once the clock strikes midnight, that door closes, the perks disappear, and you'll be locked out of the early drops. Grab your earphones, lock your doors, and claim your copy right now before the internet catches fire. The link is in the comments section and description box.